My name is Jules Henningberg, and you're listening to Pro Lacrosse Talk.
Tom Schreiber. Sidearm whip. Scores.
Now in front. Fidel scores. Paul Rabel splits two and scores.
Kylie Ohlmiller showing off those shifty skills.
Kelly, not shy, bounces one home. What a start.
Welcome to Pro Lacrosse Talk, the voice of Pro Lacrosse. I'm Hutton, he's Adam. Together we're bringing you interviews with your favorite players and coaches, as well as news from all 4 professional lacrosse leagues. Stoked to have you guys again for another episode of Pro Lacrosse Talk. I'm here with Adam. Adam, how you doing today?
I'm good, brother. Doing well. Started traveling for work, so I'm excited to get off the work grind and start talking about some lacrosse.
Awesome. Yeah, we got a lot to talk about. We had our first PLL Playoff games this weekend. The MLL Playoffs are now set after the past weekend's games. We're going to talk some little fantasy lacrosse as well. We launched that last week, and I think, we got a lot of success. We had over 100 entries, and people are pretty excited about it. It's a good trial run for how fantasy lacrosse could work. And then we're going to go over some PLL awards as well and who we think should get those at the end of the season. But let's dive into that fast break to start off.
In Game 1 of the MLL's weekend, the Cannons defeated the Bayhawks 12-11. In Game 2, the Outlaws defeated the Lizards 15-12. And in arguably the biggest game of the weekend, the Blaze defeated the Rattlers 15-14 to knock the Rattlers out of playoff contention. In the playoffs for the PLL, the Redwoods defeated the Archers 16-12 to move on to the next round of the playoffs. That relegated the Archers to the draft bracket. In Game 2, the Atlas defeated the Chrome 17-8 to move to the championship game of the draft bracket. And in the battle of 1 and 2, the Whipsnakes defeated the Chaos 15-7 to move on to the championship game next weekend in Philadelphia.
Yeah, some great games. Not bad for a first PLL playoff weekend, and it's nice to finally get those MLL teams set. So we're really getting in the thick of things at the final end of this field lacrosse season. But let's talk about these PLL playoff matchups. And the first of the weekend was the Archers at the Redwoods. Really exciting game. I thought these teams were pretty evenly matched going into it, and they kind of showed that right off the gate. It was back and forth. And I think the real difference maker, let's address the elephant in the room, was Tom Schreiber's injury. Adam, do you think that really cost the Archers a chance at advancing in the playoffs?
You want to think that it's not the case just because how strong of a group that team is in the Archers and the fact that they have so many other studs on that squad. But it really did seem like a momentum shift when he went down. Despite his really inspirational halftime speech, they weren't able to kind of bring it together at the end, and we'll probably talk about Jackson Place a little bit on as well, and thank goodness he's healing up okay. But I definitely think the Schreiber injury was the big turning point of this game. He's such a facilitator for that offense, and it was such a momentum shifter that you can't not look at it,
You mentioned how they came out of that half, and they seemed like they were still ready to go, but the Redwoods were firing all cylinders. They went on the 8-0 run in that third quarter. I mean, we were going to talk about another 8-goal run as well from another team later on in the Whipsnakes. But that kind of killed them, and they were playing catch up. And I think the Archers, their defense was played solid all year, and they kind of had picked the worst time to have a bad game. You kind of saw the amount of weapons that the Redwoods had. I mean, Perkovich was on his game. Brent Adams, had a 2-pointer, and that was kind of his only big play of the game. But it was came at a crucial time, and Wes Berg getting 3 straight goals for a hat trick, including a buzzer beater at half. I think that kind of just was the momentum swinger there, and I think the Redwoods never really looked back from there. And I think we talked about, too, who was going to come out and make the best halftime adjustments. And, I think the Redwoods kind of just poured it on, and, they had a lot of success at the face-off X, too, with Gorenlian, and I think that was key because we're kind of used to seeing both these teams kind of play the more settled 6-on-6 than, say, like a Whipsnakes or a Chaos, and the Redwoods kind of pushed transition, with Gorenlian. He had a goal and, forced them to respect him, and the next time he went out there, he ended up, getting an assist. I think they hit the Archers at all different angles, and I just don't think they were prepared for that. And I think we've talked about how, the face-off X has been one of their struggles, and they don't have that strong of a midfield group either, and when you don't lose your best player in Tom Schreiber, it's kind of hard to kind of recover from that, and especially with limited possessions. So I think that kind of did them in. And then, you mentioned earlier too, it was a great game until it came to a screeching halt with the Jackson Place injury. Very scary injury. We saw him kind of lean with his head a little bit. It was kind of unclear whether he was, trying to go for the end line or maybe trying to just, initiate a hit on Glazner. But, he went in at a bad angle. Looked like a scary neck injury. They had to, come get the stretcher out for him. And we've heard now that he has feeling all his extremities and he's making a good recovery, which is big because it looked really scary. I mean, you could hear a pin drop, and it lasted a good 20 minutes, that break. So I think after, there was only probably 5 minutes left in the game, I think it put a damper on an overall good first PLL playoff game, but we're glad that he's, recovering strong. But that's all I kind of have on that. I don't know what do you think from this Redwoods team? Do you think they can continue it and against the odds, win 2 straight to win this championship?
I don't see why not. I mean, with how the season has gone as a whole, I could easily see them winning, or I easily can see them getting spanked in the next game, to be honest with you. I mean, when the Archers came out and they were getting scoring from players that aren't the big three. I mean, Ryan Ambler found the back of the net. Joey Sankey started it off for them with a fantastic goal to start the game. So when that happened, I was wondering if they were going to hold on, and they certainly did. And one big thing I think that we hadn't talked about, that we've talked about for weeks past, was that double-headed goalie monster for the tandem goalie situation when it comes to the Archers. Adam Gittleman had a really strong first half.
5 goals allowed and 5 saves, so he did his job.
He held it up, and unfortunately, Drew Adams didn't have his best half. And it's not all his fault, because the shots that a lot of those shots the Redwoods were taking are fantastically placed. But this might have been the first week where I thought one goalie played dramatically better than the other. And I know the stats don't really show that, but if you watch, I felt like Gettleman was more on his game than Drew, and unfortunately that's kind of when the tide turned. I mean, the injury happened in the first half, but that might have been another reason why they lost. So it was tough, but I can certainly, going back to the Redwoods, see them cruising to the championship or getting slaughtered in the next. I honestly, it'll be interesting to see what happens, and it'll be an interesting matchup of two teams that, I mean, they're going different directions right now. If you think about it, from a big loss that we'll talk about in a second here, to a big win and decisively big loss and win. So I don't know. What are your thoughts going forward for this next game?
I just think the Redwoods, they got the best balance of veteran leadership and young talent, because all these teams are loaded with young talent as well as some veteran guys. But I think when you saw Kyle Harrison rip that top corner shot, that's when I was like, okay, the Redwoods are for real, and not that I ever doubted them, but that's when I kind of really started to believe, like, this kind of has a feeling for a magical run, because who knows if this is Kyle Harrison's last year. He's 36 years old. Hasn't really made a huge impact on the field. We'll get to it later. I think he's made a big impact, though, in the locker room. And so I think, you got Grenlian as well having a huge day when he's kind of struggled with injuries. I think everything's kind of clicking at the right time. And
sure.
I think Nat St. Laurent's got them ready, poised for a big run. But, they're going to have to go against the Chaos, who had a disappointing game, so let's dive into that one. Andy Towers' squad, I think, has been the most consistent, and they picked a bad day to have their worst game against the Whitstakes team that, looked like they didn't know where they were going the first quarter. I mean, the Chaos played really well against them.
Yep.
And it looked like, this was going to be another close one that we were used to expecting from the regular season. But, the Whips, they had that big third quarter, Mike Chanukchuk, again, with some two-point goals. I mean, it's a given now. I didn't pick him on my fantasy team. I'm kicking myself for that now, because it seems like such a given week in and week out. But, what did you see from the Chaos? Like, why do you think they came out sluggish in that second half?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, you were talking about picked a bad game. They picked a bad quarter, right, of everything. It was really that, if you look at the stat line if you take out the third quarter, it's 7-7. To be honest with you. So after the first half, it was 6-4, and the Chaos took the fourth quarter. So if you take that third quarter out, man, it's a whole different ball game. But you saw a lot of good things from the Whipsnakes. I mean, Ben Reeves had 3 points on the day, and you haven't really talked about him in the last couple weeks. You're used to talking about Chef Rambo and Ryan Jerner when it comes to their attack, but to have another guy on that offense come up big just reminds you why he was the former Tewaaraton winner. So they had big days from a lot of different areas, and from the statistics standpoint, I mean, things were pretty close in a lot of areas. I mean, Joe Nardella edged out Tommy Kelly at the face-off X, but it wasn't that despair. It was 10-13 in face-offs won by Joe Nardella. So, I mean, they just came out to play in that third quarter, and you wonder when that third quarter lead got big, were they just ready to move on to the next game? But I, for all the people that say that, I mean, it's a chance to go straight to the championship. So for them
getting a bye, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe people are worried about the how you come out of a championship game, if it's like you have a bye week, if you're going to be sluggish or not. But heck, you don't know if you're going to win or lose that next week, and you'd rather have the bye. I don't know a team that would not rather have a bye and automatically be in the championship. I mean, these are professional athletes; they're going to be ready to go, whether they have a bye or not. But why wouldn't you? They've had a long season. Why wouldn't you want to another week to rest your legs and be ready to go for the championship and be able to scout that next weekend too? So the Whips are going to be able to look at this Chaos Redwoods game and really maybe find things they weren't going to find if they had to get ready to play next week. So it was a big win for the Whip Snakes. Obviously, the Chaos still are in it, still have a chance, but they're going to have to go up, like I said, against the hot Redwoods team who earlier in the season I wouldn't call a team that was as fast-paced as the Chaos. You know, we talk about how the Chaos are fairly chaotic and run and gun. Heck, in that second half, I thought the Redwoods were pretty run and gun.
They poured it on.
Absolutely. So they may be getting the Redwoods at a bad time in their season, but I mean, I think it should be an awesome game. I'm excited. I'm going to be there in New York this weekend to see it in person. But it's going to be a fun one to watch.
Yeah, no, and I think you talked about how every team would like to have a bye, but I do say that if there's one team that's going to come back from a big loss like this, I think it's Coach Towers' squad. And honestly, you know, I picked them. My bracket's busted. I had the Archers and the Chaos winning. But I had them, you know, winning and advancing to the championship. But honestly, I don't think I could have actually pictured any other way. You know, I think now they got the chip on their shoulder. It's lit a fire under them. You know, he's going to have them prepared to take on this Redwoods team, and it's going to be a slugfest, I think.
Yep.
And, you know, we know these teams don't like each other. I mean, week 3, you had a skirmish and some punches thrown. And then, the second time they played each other, again, Chaos won 13-10. So, these teams don't like each other. It's going to be a close match, and, now it's kind of like do or die. You know, there's no more win and you get a bye. It's like you got to win, get to the championship, and you're in. And you're playing the Whip Snakes, and Whip Snakes can rest easy a little bit, but they're gonna have to be prepared for a hot team that's gonna come out of whoever comes out of this slugfest, because I think whoever wins this game is gonna have the most momentum going into this championship.
Yep.
But we can't ignore the other game that happened. The Atlas versus the Chrome. That was obviously not any playoff implications, but it was for that top draft pick. Chance to go play. So the winner would get the bye to the first round draft. The winner would get the bye to go to the draft pick game, and the loser would have to play the loser of the Archers Redwoods. So it ended up being the Atlas. They pummeled the Chrome. It didn't even look like the Chrome were interested at all. And I think the frustrations could really show when you had Justin Gutterding saying, Connor Busick is beating us by himself, because Connor Busick ended up having 9 goals on the day. Yep. And the Chrome, they only finished with 8 goals. So it was 17-8, a dominant win by the Atlas. And I think they kind of proved that, they kind of, maybe deserved a shot at the playoffs. They didn't get it done in the regular season, though. So they're unfortunately looking on the outside in. But a statement win by them. And they seem determined to, just go out on top and, hopefully get this top draft pick for them too, because they could be scary next year if they get a guy like Ament or, or Michael Sowers. So, that's the other thing you wanted to mention, about this draft pick game.
Yeah, I mean, the winner of this first overall pick is going to be really reflective. It's not like previous years when Pat Spencer was the unanimous first overall pick. It's really dependent on team who's going to be first overall this year at this point in the season, obviously. I mean, if you could see the Archers going TD Ireland with the first overall pick, with how the face-off X really kind of affected them in a variety of ways this year. Or you could see a squad that has a lot of Canadians go Jeff Teat first overall. So it's going to be really interesting. Obviously, the college season has to play out, and we'll see how things go from there. The cream might rise to the top when it comes to that, but it's going to be really reflective of that first overall pick, I think, depending on who wins.
Yeah, no, and I honestly think too, like you could also see with the Chrome, them maybe taking, maybe you get an Ament, but I could see them going another Penn State guy and taking Mac O'Keefe, a lethal shooter. They have Justin Gutterding, who can obviously do it all over the field, and a guy like Wolf, who can also, feed and score from around the crease. So I don't know, they don't really have that sniper attackman really right now, at least, a young guy. So I think maybe they could go that route as well. It's definitely interesting, and I think, it's been fun to kind of pay attention to these games, even if they don't have any playoff implications.
Sure, yeah, and it'll be fun to see who goes. And for you interested in the draft game, we'll definitely have some analysis of who we expect. We'll definitely have some coverage of that once we get closer to PLL draft time in the offseason as well. So,
yeah, definitely. With that, though, let's segue into our PLL awards. So we haven't really talked about them, but they did announce them last week. They have the nominees, and I know you have some picks that you kind of want to talk about, and I have my ideas of the guys I think are deserving. So let's just go down the list.
Yep.
So to start, you have the Brendan Looney Leadership Award. So Brendan Looney, obviously, he played at Navy. For those not familiar, he was a defenseman there. Big pivotal part of their championship run in 2004 that fell short to Syracuse. I was actually at that game. That was my first ever NCAA lacrosse game. My dad went to Navy, so it was a big day for him. But he was tragically killed in action. He was a Navy SEAL upon his college career. So they gave this award out to pretty much honor the person who exhibits leadership and kind of reflects Brendan Looney's character. So I think this is a great award. I'm glad that they have this. I think you couldn't have named it after a better person. And the nominees this year are Brody Merrill, John Galloway, and Kyle Harrison. So who do you think is most deserving of those three, Adam?
I think we're on the same page when it comes to this one, and I'd have to go Kyle Harrison on this one. He didn't have the biggest production year when it comes to statistics for his career, but you could tell that he was a huge leader on the sidelines, huge advocate for a lot of those players, and we heard from Jules Henenberg when he was on the pod about his experience with Kyle, so I'd have to go Kyle Harrison. I mean, all these, both Brody and Galloway too, have had fantastic careers and are true leaders on their squad. Galloway, as you know, I think when it comes to leadership, being a leader and kind of knowing that maybe it's not your time, and he came back from being benched at one point and shows real strong leadership to come back from that and support Queener when he was in there and whatnot. But I'd have to go Kyle Harrison with this kind of long-winded answer to it.
Yeah, no, that's who I'm picking too, and kind of for the reasons you mentioned. He's been a leader, like even just for the organization of the PLL
Exactly.
as a whole.
Yep.
With a lot of social issues. I love that they had the African American lacrosse players shirt that they debuted this past weekend. A lot of those players were wearing them. They had a list of 6 names, including Kyle Harrison's father, who was part of the 10 Bears at Morgan State. And I just thought that was a really nice touch, for them to recognize those that came before them. Especially the people in the African American community, because this sport is for everyone. It started by the Native Americans, adopted by the French colonists. It's a Canadian sport, an American sport. It's really a multinational sport, which is, I think, really important that we recognize its roots. But yeah, from a locker room standpoint, I don't think anyone's had a bigger impact than Kyle Harrison, and him talking about Ryder Garnsey, a kid who they have a picture of him. Them together from one of his camps, and now to be playing as teammates, I think that's special. And I think just the way he carries himself, every sideline interview he has, it's just from a place of humility and how he's very grateful that he's on this team and on this run. So I'd love to see him maybe go out on top if this is his final year as a 36-year-old.
Yep, agreed.
So now our next award is the Jimmy Regan Award, Teammate Award, named after former Duke player. And this award was tough for me because you had three guys that it's a tough award to kind of give to because you see teamwork all over the field. But you have Adam Gittleman for the Archers, Mark Lassini for the Chaos, and John Rannigan for the Chrome. Who do you really feel like deserves this one, Adam?
Yeah, this is a tough award just because we're not in the locker room, right? We're not with them on a day-to-day basis, and it's other than watching the games, and you don't get too much sideline coverage, right? So it's really tough to determine who is that tough teammate because the top teammate, because a lot of that's behind the scenes, and I think I'm probably kind of on the same lines as you, and Adam Gittleman is the person that I follow the most out of these three, which would lean me towards going Adam Gittleman. But all three are fantastic people on and off the field. It seems like I just have heard from Adam Gittleman the most and followed him the most, so he'd have to be my pick.
Yeah, no, I got to go with him too, and because I think he accepted the role of being the first half goalie with grace. He started out as a starter. You never saw any complaining. Not that these players really complain at all anyway, but I just think how he accepted that role was, pretty admirable. So I think that's why he's most deserving. And again, kudos to the PLL for these, the way they named these awards after. Again, like Jimmy Regan, being Duke Lacrosse, but also a former Army Ranger who also was killed in action. Talk about two awards, name them after veterans. Me being a Army reservist myself, it's kind of special for me to kind of talk about these players that came before that were so involved in the lacrosse community, and now you have awards named after them. So
Absolutely.
Again, kudos to the PLL for that. And we move on to the Wells Crowder Humanitarian Award. We have Scott Ratliff, Justin Gutterding, and Eric Law. Who do you feel is most deserving of this? Again, another tough one because all these guys are pretty involved in the community and do a lot of great stuff, kind of humanitarian work as well. But I think you had one guy in mind that you were particularly wanted to talk about. So
I think we're unanimous in this one as well, and it has to go to Scott Ratliff. Just with his work with the Give and Go Foundation, he and Adam Gittleman, I was kind of expecting his name in this one as well. But Scott Ratliff, from a global standpoint, is really trying to grow the game. And where lacrosse stands at this point, obviously we need the grassroots efforts, but his ability to kind of be a strong individual at the global level is something that is fantastic for the game right now to grow on the international level. We're going to see it in the Olympics, and his ability to kind of grow it globally is something that is pretty fantastic. So I'd have to go with Scott Ratliff, and we'll hear from him in an article that you're going to be putting out soon.
Yeah, I got to talk to Scott and Adam both at the beginning of the season, and I've had in the works article about the Give and Go Foundation, but they are just two great human beings, talking to them and how involved they are in the sport and how passionate they are about sharing it and spreading it, and they're doing a lot of great work. So I really encourage you guys to go look up their foundation. They go to different countries and try to spread the game of lacrosse, and it's really important if we want this, sport to go global and be at the Olympic level. And again, with Scott, he's just a positive person. He just talking to him, and if you follow his Twitter account, I think he posts one positive thing a day or whatever that he tries to put out, and he's never negative. So he's just a good human being that and I think our sport's lucky enough that we have a lot of great guys. We don't really have any bad guys. Where you got the world of Antonio Browns out there, the selfishness. You have a lot of selfless guys in the sport of lacrosse. So I think he's deserving. Justin Gutterding, though, and Eric Law, also two deserving guys. So if they get it, they deserve it as well. But that's where I go from that. And then our final character award, I would say, is the Dave Huntley Sportsmanship Award. And the nominees for that are Brody Merrill, Connor Farrell, and Joey Sankey. So who do you think is most deserving in this category, Adam?
I think I have to go with Brody Merrill in this one. The award's named after a Canadian, so I think inevitably the first winner of this award should be a Canadian. He's a fantastic person, tenacious on the field, classy guy off. He is an interesting one when it came to that first award we were discussing for the leadership award. It seems like he's more of a quiet leader when it comes to that, and is not as vocal when it comes to being on the field, but he's more silent but deadly, but a fantastic leader, fantastic sportsman, and I can't think of a better person to win the Dave Huntley Award than a guy that played for Dave.
Yeah, no, I was really leaning towards Brody as well. But yeah, I'm going to go with a wild card and say Connor Farrell, just because, a guy who played D2 lacrosse, comes in the the PLL and just makes a huge impact, but has a lot of fun with the game, and I think that's what has been fun about the PLL is it's kind of given the old guys and the new guys a platform to kind of just enjoy the game again as professionals. Watching Connor Farrell, he's just a ball of energy. He's almost like a little kid playing the sport, even though he's a huge guy, probably like 6'2" or something. He's ginormous, on that all milk diet. But I think his sportsmanship is kind of what's gotten me, because I think he's one of the last people to leave the field, after signing all the autographs and stuff. And I think that says a lot. And I think players respect him. I think it's a lot to be said about a guy who a lot of these Division I players played against each other, knew each other in high school and college. And Connor Farrell, he's a Long Island guy, but he played D2, so he doesn't have those collegiate connections. And I think he's come into the league and fit right in. So I think that's a testament to his character. So I'd go with him for this award. But now we actually get to the performance awards on the field. We have 4 nominees for the Rookie of the Year. We have Tim Troutner, Connor Farrell, Jack Rowlett, and Ryder Garnsey. Adam, I think I kind of know where you might go with this, you being a goalie, but who you want as the Rookie of the Year?
I think if anyone's ever heard me talk, I think goalie's one of the hardest positions to play, especially for a rookie to come in to a starting role when I don't know if anyone was going to pick him coming out of training camp to win. I got to go with Timmy Troutner. Fantastic season. He won I can think of at least 2 games where I think he single-handedly won the Redwoods a few games based off of his playing cage. Obviously, Connor Farrell, Jack Rowlett, Ryder Garnsey, fantastic options as well. But arguably, I think Timmy Troutner had the biggest impact of any of the rookies that were nominated, so I'd have to go with Tim.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you have to say about Troutner, and a lot of people didn't really think he was going to be the starter when he came into the league. But I'm going another Redwoods. I'm going Ryder Garnsey because people forget, he's been electric the whole season. He's probably been their biggest star so far. You can talk about Jules coming over in the trade, but Ryder is he plays with a type of energy. He's up there in points.
Yep.
And he does it all. He does it all over the field. He can score. He can feed in the most intricate of ways. And again, I think it's amazing to me that he didn't play most of his senior season at Notre Dame. Yep. He was out until the final week of the playoffs, and he had a decision to make where he could, redshirt and maybe come back another year. He struggled, I think, with the grades, and that's why he didn't play. But he decided to come back, and play in that playoff run, and he made an impact, and he stepped right into the Redwoods offense, and from the get-go, he was lights out, and that's kind of why I think they ended up moving Joey Sankey, and that's not a discredit to Joey Sankey, another phenomenal attackman, but Ryder Garnsey just gives them so much more, and I think he's going to be a fun player to watch for years to come.
Absolutely. I think we can both agree we think it's going to be a Redwood, though.
Yes, definitely. And then that moves on to the Dave Petramala Defensive Player Award. We have Garrett Epple, Jared Newman, and Tucker Durkin, all very deserving. Who do you think, though, is the most deserving, Adam?
I think this is a unique award because each of these defenders really brings something unique to the table. Garrett Epple is the most defensive of the defenders, right? I think on this list, and Jared Newman, a fantastic close defender, but also brings probably the most offensive game from this group. So I think I'm going to have to go with the guy that's taken the league by storm. I'm going to go Jared Newman in this one, just because of what he brings to the offensive side of the ball as a defender and the defensive side of the ball. He's one of the best players in the league. Any of them would be fantastic options, but now that I say it out loud, I'm going Jared Newman.
Yeah, no, and he's benefited really from this shortened field. And he's a threat from the 15-yard arc. So, yeah, I agree with you. That's a good pick. But I'm going Garrett Epple. He's got 23 caused turnovers, 40 ground balls. The next closest in caused turnovers is Ratliff with 13. He's got 10 more than everybody else. He's just been a force all over the field, and I think he's a big reason why that group with Landis and Glazner are playing so well, for the Redwoods. So I'm going him for the Dave Petramala Defensive Player Award.
Completely understandable.
Yep. And then following that, we have Long Stick Midfielder Award, and that's actually named after Brody Merrill, who's still playing. So unique for a player to be still playing and named after him, but that's a testament, to Brody Merrill.
To not be nominated for his own award.
I know, exactly. Which it would have been a little strange,
No,
if he did win it. Brody Merrill gets the Brody Merrill Award. But we got 2 people on this list. It's Scott Ratliff and Michael Earhart. This one was really tough for me, but I'm going to go Scott just because he is second in caused turnovers, 13. He's got 29 ground balls on the season, and I just think he's a good offensive leader. Not that Earhart isn't, but he's one of those guys that they turn to. He's like him, Holman, and Schreiber, I think, are the guys that really run that team. And Manny as well. And I think you kind of see that his impact at the transition game and on the defensive side of the ball was really seen for this Archers defense. So I'm going Ratliff.
Yeah, I think I'd have to go with Scott as well. I mean, just from a standpoint based off of statistics, both are fantastic players to that effect. But Scott had 13 caused turnovers to Michael's 6 this year. And you can obviously look at other stats too based off of that. But I think Scott had the most well-rounded season of the 2, so I have to give him the nod.
All right, and then our next award is the Short Stick Defensive Midi Award. It's the George Moriarty Hard Hat Award. And so we got Dominique Alexander, Mark Lassini, and Ty Warner on this list. This one, again, kind of tough. Those guys kind of do the intangibles. It's kind of tough to quantify it.
Yeah.
But to me, there's one guy that kind of sticks out in my mind, and that's Mark Lassini. The way he just takes shots like a madman to his back. And I'm actually more concerned about, him getting injured. But for right now, we'll make it, a reason why he deserves this award because he's just tenacious on the field and he easily could win that teammate award as well because of the type of impact he brings and how he does the the dirty work. That's why I think it's the Hard Hat Award. So he's my pick for the George Moriarty Hard Hat Award.
Yeah, I'd have to go with him as well. I mean, when you think of a D-midi, what do you think of? The nitty-gritty, the dirty stuff. And what's more dirty than turning your back to a shot and taking it? So, I mean, I'd have to go with Glassini as well for that reason. I mean, you could potentially go with either the other 2, and Dominique Alexander has a unique kind of play where he plays D-mid, but he can also take the ball, and transition game is such a big thing this year with how the PLL and the shortened field is, that he'd be a fantastic choice just because of his transition abilities. But when it comes to the name of the award, we have to go with Glassini.
Yep, exactly. And going off of that, we have the Orin Lions Goalie of the Year Award. So we got Blaze Reardon, Kyle Bernlohr, and Jack Cannon. I know you probably have a strong opinion on this one. This one was really tough for me. I feel like all these guys played phenomenal during stretches during the season. But who do you think deserving of this Goalie of the Year award?
This one was a tough one for me to pick. That all 3 had fantastic seasons, but I'm have to go with Jack Concannon. I think he's been the most dominant of all 3 of these goalies for the extended period of time. I don't remember a game this season where the Atlas were out of it because Jack Concannon was playing so well. Whether it's him winning the MVP award for the All-Star game or his play to pretty much give the Atlas a shot to even make the playoffs when it came to the second to last week of the regular season, and then his play to get that last win. Unfortunately, they didn't make the playoffs, but it was despite of Jack Concannon's play. And this was the first year where he had a starting job to himself. After coming from the MLL, he was a backup for the most part, and he showed that he belongs in cage for the whole game.
Yeah, no, and he took the spot of a more than capable goalie in Scott Rogers, who unfortunately had a at-risk surgery that kind of made him miss it, but it ended up being to the benefit of the Atlas, I think. And again, you mentioned Reardon and Bernlohr could easily win this award. I mean, it's tough, but I just look at a guy that I wouldn't say Bernlohr or Reardon are the MVPs of their teams. I could easily say Concannon.
Absolutely,
is.
Yep.
And so that's why I'm with you. You got to give him this award. And just he's had some unreal games. That game that gave him a shot at making the playoffs. He had 18 saves and only let in 8. So he's been great all season, and like you said, he's been one of the few constants of the Atlas. So I agree with you. But going off of that, another constant for the Atlas all year. It's been Trevor Baptiste. So we have Trevor Baptiste and Joe Nardella are the finalists for the Paul Cantabine Face-Off Man of the Year award. Who do you think's deserving of this? I kind of already have my guess, but
as great of a season as Joe Nardella has from an offensive standpoint, his ability to go down after winning a face-off to score, you have to go with Trevor Baptiste. I mean, the statistics just don't lie. When we talk about consistency, there weren't many on the Atlas. Jack Kincannon was one. You already said it. Trevor Baptiste was the other. So I'd have to go with Trevor in this one.
Yeah, no, you mentioned consistency. He's never had less than 54% face-off percentage this whole season. I mean, talk about consistency. And, I think the one game, it was as high as 70. For you to win over half your team's possessions, that's key. I think he was, again, like one of those constants, and I think he's, going to be a critical part for them going forward. Yep. But that brings us to our Midfielders Award. It's the Gate Brothers Midfielder Award. You got, again, another great list. This is so tough to make all these decisions, but you got Jake Fricaro with the Chaos, who I think could have been a dark horse early on, maybe for midfielder of the year or even MVP the way he was playing. Hasn't had the best games recently, but he's still performed at a high level. And then you have Ned Crotty, who's been, one of the constants for the Chrome. He's been a real leader on the field and, a natural attackman playing midfield. He's done really well, for the Chrome, especially in that role. And then Tom Schreiber, who we've had on the podcast and who's considered arguably the greatest player of the times right now. So who do you think's going to get this one? Who's most deserving of it?
I'm going to have to go with Tom Schreiber in this one. He's the best all-around player between those three. Ned Crotty and Jake Fricaro had fantastic seasons. But as we saw this weekend, that Archer's offense really ran through Tom. So I'd have to go with Schreiber in this one. Best overall player in the game, arguably, right now. So he's the best midfielder.
Yeah, no, and I think you look at, he's second in assists. He's got 18 behind Rambo's 23, which to me is absurd as a midfielder, and he's really just transformed that midfield position because there's really not a guy like him out there. His style is just so unique. The way he feeds, I still can't get over final game of the season when he made that cross the field pass to Holman. Like almost like a no look, like just slinging it. He's just tremendous vision. So I think he deserves it. All three of these guys deserve it, but he's definitely the most deserving. And then we have the Eamon McEnany Attackman of the Year award. Connor Fields, Matt Rambo, Marcus Holman. Another tough one. I mean, these guys, it's tough. Like, you have such phenomenal players in this league, and they mean so much to their team. But who do you think's most deserving of this Attackman of the Year award?
This was probably the toughest for me. And to think that I have Marcus Holman third on any list is pretty remarkable. But I'm going to have to take Connor Fields in this one. He's one of the most electric players to watch on the field on a weekly basis. And I honestly think without him, the Chaos would be a lot more lost potentially than the Archers and Whipsnakes would be with the other two candidates. So I'm going to have to take Connor Fields in this one.
I have to kind of, agree with that, with saying that he probably means the most to his team. So that's a good point. But I'm going with Rambo. I mean, you kind of saw what happened when they didn't have him play in that second half. And even when he doesn't have his best game, he's such a facilitator, through the offensive zone and through X. He can just do it all. And, he's got the size, he's got the stick skills. To lead in assists, with 23 and total points with 42, I guess got to give it to him. And then, that brings us to our final player award is the Jim Brown MVP award. Again, we just talked about these guys, but Connor Fields, Matt Rambo, Tom Schreiber, all three, again, deserving it. All of them meant so much to their team. But Adam, who do you think is deserving of the most valuable player?
I know Connor Fields and Tom Schreiber are obviously fantastic players. I picked them for the last two awards. But ironically enough, I'm going to have to go with Rambo in this one. His team is in the championship, and I think MVP are generally the players that squads are in the championship. Matt Rambo's squad had the most successful season of the three, so I'm going to go with Rambo.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Schreiber. I mean, you saw when he got injured, in that playoff game, and he kind of kept that offensive going despite its inconsistencies at the face-off in the midfield. So I think he's most deserving of MVP, and I hope he's the one that ends up winning it. But again, all the three of these guys are deserving. And then finally, our final award is the Dick Adele Coach of the Year award. We have Coach Andy Towers, Jim Stagnita, and Chris Bates. Who do you think is most deserving of this award, Adam?
I have to go with Coach Stagnita. For a coach to have the ability to sit arguably the MVP of the league, and for that player to come back, react with a positive outlook. The team seems really behind him. They're in the championship game. They've had the most successful season so far. I'm going to have to go with Stags.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Coach Towers. He led them to the top spot in the regular season. They've never really faltered until this recent playoff game, and even then it was just one bad quarter. So I think he's gotten them to perform. I think you got a lot of different types of players on that team, and he's gotten them to play as a unit and in a unique style, which is tough being a new franchise. All these franchises are new, but they found their identity pretty early on. So I think he's most deserving of the Dick Adele Coach of the Year award. Well, that wraps up our PLL awards and who we think was going to win. We're going to dive into some PLL Fantasy Lacrosse, but let's first hear a word from our sponsor.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of the Pro Lacrosse Talk podcast. We've been using Anchor for our podcast since the very start. Anchor gives you everything you need in one place, and better yet, it's free. They allow you to easily record and edit your podcast so it sounds great and send it out to all the major networks such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and many more. Better yet, they connect you with advertisers so you can start making money from your podcast right away. So if you're interested in starting a podcast, download the Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started.
All right, welcome back. So let's talk some PLL Fantasy Lacrosse. This is going to be like our first Fantasy Lacrosse segment. We talked about a little bit what it was going to be about last week, but now we actually have some actual data and some results from how it went, and I think it was a success. We had 114 total rosters submitted. It was a lot of work for us behind the scenes to put together, but I think it was well worth it. I think people enjoyed it, and we're gathering some valuable data. If the league like the PLL or any other league or entity decides to end up getting into fantasy lacrosse, we're definitely trying to make our name in it. But we're just excited to kind of get it off the ground and share it with you. But let's dive into our top performers of the week. We had at face-off, Greg Gorenlian had 10.5 points. He had a goal and an assist as well as killing it at the face-off X.
Yep.
Connor Farrell, he had 7 points, and Joe Nardella was close behind with 6.5, so they were the top face-off performers. At attack, we had Ryder Garnsey with 6.5. Connor Fields had 5 points, and Marcus Holman also had 5. So those were our top attackmen. A little bit disappointing. Rambo only had 2 points. More of a quiet day, but I wouldn't fret. I would still keep him in mind for your guys' roster come week 3. At the midfield, everyone kind of had a solid game. There was around like 3 to 4 points for the top midfielders, but the two guys that really made a name for themselves were Connor Busick and Mike Chanichuk. Not really a shocker at them performing, but the totals that they had. Busick had 9 goals, including 3 2-pointers, so that he had a big day for you guys that picked him. And then Mike Chanichuk also had 2 2-pointers. So it pays to pick a guy that has that 2-point threat and is also going to get a lot of shots off. So, those are some guys you want to look for going forward. At defense and long stick mini, Ratliff had 4.5. He got a goal in the game and had some ground balls and caused turnovers. Austin Pafani also had 4. He was kind of a sleeper that no one really talked about. I know you actually had him on your team, though, Adam, so he did a good job for you. And Tucker Durkin and Cade Van Raphorst were rounding it out at 3.5. You had Garrett Epple, Glazner, they had 3. So a lot of defensemen had solid days, but those were your top performers. And then in cage, Jack Concannon, no shock there, had 6.5 points. He had the biggest day. Bernlohr also did well, and none of these goalies did too poor other than Drew Adams, who actually got you negative 0.5 if you started him, unfortunately. So, he was disappointing. Jared Newman also 0 points. A lot of people picked him for their defensive slot. So if you picked him kind of hoping for a 2-bomb from him, you were kind of left wanting a little bit more, but you can pick him next week. Maybe you'll have a turnaround against the Redwoods. We want to just say congratulations to our winning roster for this week. CG Trojans, who had 52 points. You had some guys up there at the top had 50, 49, but he ended up finishing with 52, which was the just consistency between the positions. He had Henningberg with 4.5, Holman with 5, Rambo had 2, Busick had 9, Connor Kelly had 3, Schreiber had 2, Bryce Young had 2, Ratliff had 4.5, Eppel had 3, Gorenlian had 10.5, and Cannon had 6.5. So it paid that he got some of the big performers at the midfield, goalie, and face-off X, as well as LSM. So if you hit those big guys, you can really have a big day in this pick 'em. But remember, you guys, it's weekly prizes. So we sent him a free Pro Lacrosse tank. We have a Fantasy Lacrosse hat coming up this week. And don't forget, our big prize is the Epic All-Star Game gloves that Epic Lacrosse has given us to give as a giveaway. So we want to thank Epic for helping us out with this Fantasy Lacrosse Pick 'em and giving us this grand prize to give away to the winner of the end of this Fantasy Lacrosse season. So make sure you guys submit your rosters. You can go to prolacrossetalk.com/fantasy-lacrosse. Fill out your roster. It will be open up until game time come Saturday. So make sure you fill out your roster and get your fantasy on.
There you go.
But with that wraps up our Fantasy Lacrosse coverage. Let's go to a quick break, and then we'll get into the MLL action. All right, so welcome back. Now it's time to discuss some Major League Lacrosse. So we had 3 games this weekend. All 6 teams played. Some playoff spots on the line, and they are actually all now filled. The Outlaws, the Bayhawks, the Cannons, and the Blaze are your final 4 playoff teams, despite the regular season not being over. Rattlers were eliminated because of their loss to the Blaze and their record. So the Rattlers run, unfortunately, is over. I think they have a bright future ahead, with Sean Scanoni, Bubba Voigt, Bryce Wasserman. Shout out to him who made the game after attending a wedding. He left at 6 and ended up making it to the game at 7 via helicopter. So shout out to him. Pretty epic way to go to a game. The video is online if you guys want to check it out, but I thought that was pretty cool and showed his dedication to the team despite the 15-14 loss. But that begs the question, Adam, of these 4 playoff teams, who do you think is going to finish the strongest, and who do you think has the best chance to make a run at this championship?
Yeah, no, I think the Outlaws have an awesome outlook. They have the perfect opportunity after this week to play playoffs at home. It may not be their main home, but it's right around the corner. They are the only squad in the entire league with a winning record at home this year. It probably, like you said last week, has to do with travel time and those types of things, but they have the best outlook, I think, of any squad kind of going down the line. I think it's pretty crazy of me to say that when they were on that 4-game losing skid. I don't think it was going to be the case, but I think maybe some of us were getting a little too nervous there more than we should have. But, it's kind of funny to think also that these were probably the 4 teams a couple games into the season that we would expect to be in the playoffs. And then once the Rats went on that winning streak, they made it a little bit more interesting. Like you said, it's tough to see them out, but I'm excited for these playoffs.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is kind of what we expected. I did think the Lizards would, have a better season, maybe than, say, the Blaze, but, it was pretty clear early on that they weren't going to be in it. And then, the Rattlers came out of nowhere, but it was kind of a little too late for them. But yeah, I like the Outlaws a lot too. I mean, I really went back and forth. I think I would pick the Outlaws just because they don't really have any glaring weaknesses. They have a solid goaltender in Dylan Ward, Max Adler at the face-off X. Defense has been pretty solid. That kind of can be their Achilles heel, but I think, they've really put it together in these final games. And again, you can't talk about enough the talent on that offensive side with Grant Jr. and Aslanian and Courier and Kavanaugh. I mean, there's just so many guys. Ryan Lee. It's just so many guys on that team. So I think they're poised to make it to the championship. I'd like maybe I could see the Bayhawks too, but they've gone through a lot of face-off guys. I think that's something they've struggled with this year. And then the Blaze have looked good at points, but they get into these high-scoring affairs. Their defense just sometimes throws these games away, and if Stotts and Shane Jackson aren't really on, it kind of hurts them. So I think it's the Outlaws is to lose, but there's a team that I think is gonna give them their all, and I think it's the Cannons. They've really haven't played a bad game all year, apart from that 22-9 loss to the Outlaws a week ago. I think if you scratch that, you'd burn that tape. they're another favorite. They haven't lost a game by more than 3 other than that Outlaws game the whole season. And they've won some tight ones, and they've gone into these away games and beat up on some teams and pulled out some gutsy wins as well. So I think they're another team that looks really complete. And talk about goalies, Nick Morocco has been solid all year up until this point. So I just think they're another team that I think we've kind of been sleeping on, and I think they're getting hot at the right time.
Yep, and just like we kind of discussed with the PLL, this has been one of the most exciting seasons for professional lacrosse as a whole, because there really hasn't, whether it's the teams at the top that have been there for predominantly the whole season in both leagues, they still lost games that we weren't expecting them to lose, and teams lower down in the seeding won games that we weren't expecting them to win. This has been the most well-rounded season of professional lacrosse in both leagues that I can ever remember.
Yeah, no, I have to agree, and we got twice as many games this year, which has been fun. So another, pro for the fans to have 2 leagues going on.
Yep.
We can let these leagues battle it out in terms of ratings and and survivability and and viability and stuff. But as a fan, it's never been better to be a fan of professional lacrosse. And the MLL recently too announced their awards. That's actually going to be done by fan vote. So you guys have the opportunity to vote. And I'll read the nominees right now. We have. For the Coca-Cola MVP, Craig Chick, Mark Cockerton, Brian Cole, Zach Currier, Grant Jr., Shane Jackson, Rob Pinnell, Sean Scanoni, Randy Stotts, and Lyle Thompson are all nominees, and you can also do a write-in as well. Offensive Player of the Year, Chris Aslanian, Brian Cole, Mark Cockerton, Zach Currier, Shane Jackson, Tommy Palasek, Rob Pinnell, Randy Stotts, Steele Stanwyck, and Lyle Thompson. And again, for all these you can do a write-in. Defensive Player of the Year, Jesse Bernhardt, who's been on our podcast, Liam Burns, Craig Chick, Greg Danseglio, Justin Pugel, Jake Pulver, Ben Randall, Rylan Reese, Alex Spring, and Finn Sullivan. And then the Warrior Goalie of the Year, Nico Amato, Austin Kaut, Chris Madelon, Nick Morocco, Sean Scanoni, and Dylan Ward. Finally, for the Player Awards, Cascade Rookie of the Year, Chris Aslanian, Craig Chick, Zach Goodridge, Warren Jeffrey, Andrew Koo, Rylan Reese, Sean Scanoni, Brendan Sunday, Bradley Voigt, and Alex Woodall. And finally, in terms of coaches, we have the MLL Coach of the Year award, Liam Banks for Atlanta, Dave Cottle for Chesapeake, B.J. O'Hara for New York, Sean Quirk for Boston, Tony Seaman for Denver, and Bull Warder for Dallas. So all the coaches there. So they're giving the fans the chance to vote on the awards. I think that's a unique approach. I do kind of like when the leagues have a little bit more control over who gets the awards, but it's 2 different approaches, and it's really, to me, it's neither one is a bad way. It depends on whether you really want to give the fans a big input, or whether you want to take a more formal approach to it. So I think it's an interesting way to go about it, and I don't think it's a wrong way to go about it. So we'll be voting on those soon, and we're going to give you guys our picks next episode. So be on the lookout for that in the recap episode next week. But those are your awards for the MLL. With that brings us to our game picks. So we got some playoff games on the line, and then some MLL games to wrap us up towards the end of the season. But let's go with the PLL right off the bat, Adam. We got Archers versus Chrome. Who you picking in this one?
I'm going Archers. I think they're going to want to win this one for Tom Schreiber and Jackson Place. It just didn't look like the Chrome were in it last week. It was a tough game to watch, and the Archers played strong up until the end, so I'm going to have to go Archers.
Yeah, I'm going Archers as well. The Chrome just don't look like they have a lot of fight in them left, so I think the Archers are a little bitter about, missing the next round of the playoffs, so I think they're going to come out hot. And then the following game in the playoffs, we have the Chaos versus the Redwoods for a chance to play the Whip Snakes in the championship. Adam, who are you picking in this one?
I know it might be the fad pick right now, but the way they're playing, I'd have to go Redwoods just based off of last week and how they seem to be playing as a team. I think they have a strong chance of winning this one and facing the Whips in the championship.
I think Coach Towers is going to light a fire in these guys if it's not already there, and I think the Chaos are a scary team when they have a chip on their shoulder. So I'm going to go the other route. I'm going to go the Chaos, and I think they're going to look to enact some revenge on the Whip Snakes come championship weekend. But that wraps up the PLL. Now our MLL games, we only have 2. We have the Bayhawks at the Outlaws. I'm going to go with the Bayhawks in this one just because I think, I think they want to go out on a high note. They lost this past week, even despite getting a playoff berth. So I think they're going to come gunning for the Outlaws. And, I do like the Outlaws to win it overall, but I think it's to end the regular season. I think the Bayhawks want to go out on top, so I think they're gonna pull one out. How about you, Adam?
I'm going to take the Bayhawks in this one as well. So I'm excited to see this matchup. And I'm also going to skip ahead and say I'm going to take the Cannons in Game 2 of the weekend, just so these can be preliminary games and have rematches for the standings-wise come first week of playoffs for the semifinals.
Yeah, I'm going to go Cannons as well against the Blaze. I think the Blaze are kind of hanging in there right now. They've shown they can play with any of these teams, but they need to kind of prove something to me. Cannons are playing the best lacrosse right now, and these teams only have 2 more games left in the season, so I think they want to end on a high note. So that's why I'm going to go with the Cannons in this one. But yeah, that wraps up our game picks and our podcast. Be on the lookout. We have our Coach Starja interview is out right now, so feel free to listen to that. We have another week of fantasy lacrosse, so make sure you submit a roster. You don't have to have done one prior, but if you did play last week, definitely play again this week, because we do have a chance to win the Epic All-Star Game gloves as the grand prize, so you want to, make sure you submit a roster every week if you want a chance to win those. And then we have upcoming interviews with Tiana Walper of the Brave. Connor Busick of the Atlas is going to join us after his 9-point performance in Ohio. And then coach of the Whipsnakes, Jim Stagnita, is going to join us as well right before the championship game. So a lot of great interviews coming up, so be on the lookout for those. But with that concludes our podcast. So we'll go to the overtime, Adam. What are you looking forward to most this weekend?
It has to be the PLL Playoffs. I'm going to be there live. Make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and we even have a Snapchat now at Pro Lacrosse Talk. I'll be kind of documenting my trip from Baltimore to New York and the 2 games that day, so can't be more excited to be there for the live action this weekend.
Yeah, no, I wish I could be there. You're actually in my stomping grounds, but I have a prior commitment. But I'll be there in Philly, your old stomping grounds, so we're just trading places for the PLL playoffs. But I'm looking forward to mostly this fantasy lacrosse again. I wasn't very invested in the Atlas Chrome game before, but having guys on my roster kind of got me more invested, and I think that's going to be a great way for this sport to grow eventually if we do, eventually get fantasy lacrosse to be more involved in the sport, because you've just seen how many people are invested in pro football that don't even really care about football, but they have fantasy football teams. So I think if you bring that to lacrosse and introduce fantasy sports, I think you'll get a whole group of fans that you might not have had before watching these games. So we're excited to be on the cutting edge of it, and I'm looking forward to another week of it. But that wraps up our podcast. Thank you guys for listening, and we hope you tune in next time to Pro Lacrosse Talk.